All right. We're starting to record now for those who are watching the recording because we took some time to do check-ins on how everybody's feeling given the war in Israel and what's going on with the rise of anti-Semitism around the world. And I will repeat that this is something that we can continue to do each time because I think it's important to have a place to talk about it, whatever you're feeling going on for you. And any questions you might have, not that I necessarily have answers, but it's still good to put the questions out there. Just sharing what you're going through, I have found can be helpful. Just you're not holding it only on your own. All right, let's talk about kashrut, which is so hands-on for becoming an observant Jew. And I want to do a quick recap of what we spoke about last time and then go deeper into other things or questions that you may have. So last time we spoke a lot about what makes food inherently kosher, and there were a few different categories. Anybody, this is not a test, we're just doing a review. Somebody want to share different kinds of foods, whether they're kosher or not kosher? Be happy to hear. One at a time. Don't all jump at once. Latoya.
Fruits and veggies.
Fruits and veggies.
Kosher.
Exactly. They're inherently kosher. Basically, every fruit and veggie is pretty much inherently kosher. The problem is when you do processing of them. So if they're processed like grain, you don't actually sit and eat wheat. So if it's processed and made into cookies or crackers or pasta or bread or whatever it is, there may be either other ingredients in it that may not be kosher, or it may be baked or cooked, I guess, in a facility that also has non-kosher, and we don't really know that unless somebody is checking. And that is why we have those symbols, which, by the way, until maybe the 1940s, I don't remember, 50s, the OU, they are the most famous of all the supervisions in America, in North America, I guess. And they started because people would just be checking ingredients, but you don't really know everything. Also, I think ingredients in America didn't have as much tight control from the Food and Drug Administration. So it might be that they didn't list everything. Some things that were under a certain percentage may not have been mentioned. You don't know if it's in a facility which uses other products that may not be kosher or other reasons. So raw fruits and vegetables, no problem. There could be one problem, and that would be if they're cut, right? If they're raw and they're whole, there's nothing can be wrong with them unless somebody put some material, smeared something on them. But if they're raw and they're fresh and there's nothing on them and they're whole. But if it's cut, it is possible that they would be cut with a knife or with something that has that's it in itself is non-kosher. However, we spoke about only specific, like if you cut an orange, unless the knife, had meat on it or something. I mean, usually if you're going to a facility like a supermarket, they're not mixing meat and cheese with the fruits and vegetables. They're just not going to do it, partly because of vegans, partly because of or vegetarians, and partly because of the rules and the laws. There's a big difference between having a knife that had meat or cheese on it than the food on it would go bad. Everybody following me on that? Like, it doesn't make sense to have it. However, it can be more of a problem with specific vegetables that are sharp. Remember we spoke about that? Sharp vegetables. I want to go over that again. So onions, scallions, garlic, radishes. What else? Not sure about ginger. Pickles could be a problem because they have sharp in them, although anyway, the pickles have to be kosher. That might not be a problem. What else? Kohlrabi, people know what that is. And what else is there? Root vegetables, Martin? Turnips, things like that. They have a sharpness to them. And I think we all know, anybody who's worked in a kitchen, that taste is very strong and can get transferred, and it kind of embeds itself into the knife because it's sharp. So sharp in this case means two different things. A knife that may not be well cleaned or is an unkosher knife is more of a problem than, let's say, a fork, because a knife needs much better cleaning generally, especially if it has notches in it, right? I'm not even talking about a sharp blade, but a serrated blade. That can be very hard to really clean well. So we generally do not use knives that are not kosher. I just want to make that clear. So knives have a way of transferring taste, right? The whole problem is you might transfer taste of something that's not kosher. And we said that there's a few ways which taste can be transferred. One of them is through a knife or unclean utensils. Obviously, we're not talking about if you're taking a non-kosher bowl that has food in it. We're talking about clean utensils and clean bowls. So if it has heat, that can transfer taste, right? Does that make sense to people? If something is heated, that's when the taste gets fused, right? If you just put, that's not true. If you put, greasy, cold meat that's not kosher, then that would leave residue on the bowl. But you can clean that. However, if you actually heat up, even in a clean pot that was used for non-kosher food, we believe that's according to the halacha, that the non-kosher taste got infused into the walls of the pot and therefore can be exuded and can come out again into your food. Okay, so that's why when you cook it's one thing if it's raw and it's another thing if it's cooked in a non-kosher utensil, cooked, baked, broiled, boiled, any of that, heat, or if it was cut with a knife or had sharp vegetable, which is why when you go to a salad bar, theoretically, you could have all the vegetables, even if they're cut, because generally they're cut with a clean knife, but you have to make sure that the onion really, it is a clean knife that's only used for vegetables. Because it's only used for vegetables, then it can only transfer kosher taste. Does that make sense to people? But if it's the same knife at if it's a small little store and that same knife is used to cut the cheese, even if you clean it or to cut the meat, right? Because salad bars often have non-kosher, even if they're all in separate bowls. So you do have to check that. If somebody wants to eat a salad bar, let's say in a non-kosher restaurant, you do have to check those things. Does that make sense? And you might ask them, for example, to take a clean knife just to cut an onion for you. Like that. That could be a possibility. If it's a hotel or one of those places, that's large salad bars, I would assume that they would only use the same knife for fruits and vegetables. You sometimes have to check that though. If you're ordering a vegetable platter or fruit platter, like a fruit platter, you wouldn't want to taste the onion anyway, so it'll probably be a clean knife. But if you're ordering from a non-kosher place, you do have to check those things. I want to make sure that's clear. It's really important to me that you understand the idea behind it, because otherwise it's just learning by heart a whole list of rules, and that makes it much harder to remember things. So I have a thumbs up on this or more questions. Please feel free to ask as many questions as you want. Questions are always, always legitimate, because if you don't know the answer, the question is by definition very, very legitimate. I want to make sure. Okay, so we said fruits and vegetables. We went over a whole bunch of other stuff. What else? Can somebody give me a rule about kosher or non-kosher? That would be one of the rules maybe that we learned last time. I know it was like 3-4 weeks ago. Anybody else? Gabby?
No mixing meat and dairy.
No mixing meat and dairy. Excellent. So we haven't defined what meat is kosher yet, but let's just assume we have, no, that's fine. No issue. Remember we said we have different buckets of kosher. One of them is that fruits and vegetables are inherently kosher. Another one is that whatever you define meat and dairy, that may not be mixed together 100%. We just haven't actually defined what meat is, but we can go into that because somebody else maybe can say what meat is or isn't kosher. But before we do that, because you can't mix meat and dairy, that is by definition not kosher. It's actually against biblical law. I'm not talking about chicken or turkey or duck, but I'm talking about meats, beef specifically. That's why we have separate dishes, separate utensils, separate everything for meat and dairy. Just take that basic law, okay? Now, people who are adopting Sephardic custom, there are slightly different rules. Like, for example, glass plates, which, by the way, is probably true scientifically, that glass does not actually absorb taste. So theoretically, you could use it once for stew and once for macaroni and cheese, not together, obviously. But Ashkenazic halacha, Jewish law, does not believe that you can generally use glass plates for hot, separately. In other words, that the same plate or serving utensil could be used for a hot meat dish and a hot dairy dish at different times. But Sephardic is, so you could end up in a Sephardic household where they do that. And you might be very surprised that in the morning, you saw it for, I don't know, dairy cereal that's hot. And then at night, you saw the same plate being used for a chicken dish or something like that, meat. But for Sephardim, that's allowed. And Ashkenazic rule is that we do not. It doesn't matter what it's made of. I'm not talking about cold things that can really be clean. But in general, we just separate everything because it leads you to a lot of troublesome interactions or circumstances. And that's why we stay away from them by just making sure we have separate. So you don't want to use the same dishes and say, oh, half of these will be dairy and half of these will be meat, because that's just too confusing. And even in my household, eventually I'm going to get different silverware for dairy because they're too similar. And it just often they get, so we just have to be careful. But I like it when it's clear difference, different color, different something, looks very different. And I don't even like the dairy one. So that's another good reason to get it. I inherited it from somebody. Okay. So that's the meat and dairy. The other thing that comes out of that is we don't allow it to mix even in our stomachs. I know that sounds funny, but that's why people wait after meat a certain amount of time to eat dairy. Usually after dairy, we say that the digestion is very fast. There are only very specific hard cheeses. I don't know much about it. I don't eat cheese because I can't eat dairy, so I don't know. But usually aged cheese or special cheeses, I don't even know if they're available, where people say you do have to wait maybe the same amount of time after the dairy to have meat, but it's very unusual. Somebody has a question, you should definitely ask your local Orthodox rabbi or me, and I'll find out for you about a specific cheese. All right, so that's okay, so now if somebody could say Tifara Ruth, why don't you tell us how do you define what kosher meat is? Well, you have to unmute. You're muted. No.
Sorry.
Oh, we just lost her. That must be very frustrating for her. Gabby, do you want to tell other Gabby with the single B? Do you want to tell us what kosher meat is? No, Jamie.
I think it has something to do with their hooves, the animal's hooves, and
the split, yeah.
The hooves, and then what they eat or how they eat.
Chewing their cud.
That's it.
So it's a certain type of gastronomical, they have a second stomach, they regurgitate it. I mean, we don't really check that. We just know that defines it. But really what's so interesting is that generally that falls into herbivores instead of carnivores. So cows, cattle, sheep, goat, deer, venison, buffalo, bison. Don't know what else. There might be more.
How does deer, if somebody is out hunting, because like I grew up with a family of big hunters, if they shoot a buck or whatever, is that considered kosher?
So that's the second part of the kosher part. It's not enough that the animal itself is inherently kosher. It also must be slaughtered in a ritual. No, that was a great question. It was like a setup. You did really well.
Hunting season just started back in PA.
As a matter of fact, treif, which has come to mean anything non-kosher, was actually I believe originally used by the Torah. I could be wrong, but treifa, I think might be, unless that's nevela, an animal that was like died or was killed, but not ritually slaughtered. Trying to remember what treifa was used for, not sure. But there is a word for that in Hebrew, that it's dies or was killed, but not slaughtered ritually, which is supposedly a very humane way that they don't feel pain. I don't know. I've never watched it, but that's what I'm told. And it's a very clean, slicing of the head or the neck or whatever it is. And then there's a third part. So one is that it has to be actually kosher animal. The second is it has to be ritually slaughtered. And what's the third part?
It has to be cooked on kosher appliances with kosher utensils.
Yes, but you skipped one step, Gabby. There's one step between ritually slaughtered and how you cook it.
The drain the blood and
Right. So there's
salted.
right. So koshering. So koshering, of course, comes from the word kosher, but that is the word that is used. Thank you, Jeff. We'll get to you eventually. Jeff has most of the answers, so I only call on him at the end. Sorry, Jeff. In my family, we're 6 kids, and as children, my father taught us halacha or parsha every week at the Shabbat table, and he always went from the youngest to the oldest. So I'm number 2. So I was, went 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm a year and a half younger than my sister. And she has a great memory. And I always thought she was just so way smarter, which she still might be, than I am, because it doesn't matter whatever I didn't know the answer to, she always knew the answer. And probably partly because she was just much, older, and partly because she's smart and has a good memory. So Jeff, sorry, we keep you as the ace in the hole. Yeah, Gabby.
Just quick question. If an animal dies of natural causes.
Oh, you totally missed that. Jamie just asked that question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you were gone. She asked if somebody was hunted, but it doesn't matter. Hunted or natural causes. You have to have ritual slaughtering. Shechting,
so if it dies on its own, it is not kosher. It has to be killed specifically. Okay.
Right. And it can be given to, you can have benefit from it, I think, but you can't eat it. So we said it has to be a kosher animal, split hooves, choose its cud. Again, this is for beef.
Would the same thing apply for not like just eating, but using for example, for fur, for leather? Like, do those?
Right, that's what I said. I think you can have benefit from it, just not eating. That's what I meant.
Okay.
You could sell it. You can. I believe that's not an issue as far as I know. You just can't eat it. That's a good question, though. Could have gone either way, right? As far as I know, yes, you can still get use out of it, but whatever that means, sell it, use it, but you can't eat it. So first it has to be kosher animal. Second, it has to be ritually slaughtered. Now, you don't have to worry about this, guys. You go to the supermarket and you buy it. I just want to make that clear. Most of us do not go out, catch an animal, slaughter it, kosher it with salting the blood. We don't usually do that. I don't know, maybe in Jamie's family where they did a lot of hunting, did they eat the animals that they hunted?
Yeah, that was, yeah. So that's what I was thinking, because they would skin and do all that stuff too.
Wow, where are you from?
Central Pennsylvania, Altoona. It's about
Altoona.
5 hours.
Hey, we're staying away from Altoona.
That whole area out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So it has to have a ritual cleaning, which is getting rid of the blood, and it's called koshering. And I actually learned how to do it in high school in Israel, but at the time in the supermarkets, you could get koshered meat and unkoshered meat, and then you have to do it by yourself. Usually liver has a lot of blood, and there's people who eat liver. Either you buy it koshered, but then often it's overdone because it's very delicate, chicken livers. So, I learned how to do that at home, but I generally end up buying them koshered, or you have to broil them with some salt, and delicious. But okay.
What happens if you do hunt? Because I'm Métis, so like hunting is, a usual thing. Like indigenous.
You what? What was the first thing you said?
Like I'm Métis,
You're
so hunting is.
What is Métis?
Like indigenous. It's
got it. Okay, yeah, I think you told me that word before. Yeah, I thought you said I made tea. And I'm like,
Oh.
that has nothing to do with koshering
Or
an
like a
animal.
pirate mating.
Yeah.
But like what happens if, in the future I decide, go out hunting and I get and I do something wrong when I cash, or like I get something wrong.
Well,
Does
you
it
can't. Remember we said if you hunt, you won't be able to use the animal.
like
Remember we said you have to
the
have ritual slaughtering. Ritual slaughtering does not use a bullet.
okay.
It's a knife. It's a special knife. If you go out hunting as an Orthodox Jew, you will never be able to eat it. Sorry. You could sell it.
Not yet.
Yeah. What kind of animals would you usually hunt?
Like usually like traps are used more to frankly. So like you would trap maybe a rabbit or something. So I guess you could theoretically
I don't know if
do
rabbits
it
are
that way,
kosher.
but I don't know. I personally have never
Martin
eaten a
says,
rabbit.
oh, well, my husband says rabbits are not kosher. So there you go.
Okay, then
Oh, right. Because they're
there's all
not,
problem
they're
solved.
carnivorous, right? Yeah, but are they carnivorous? No, they don't eat like field mice and stuff.
Bugs Bunny
Oh,
eats
no.
Only the one in Life of Brian.
Only the one in Life of Brian.
Now,
Okay.
Holy Grail.
Holy Grail. Okay, never mind. We just Monty Python crept in there. So yes, Gabby, if you decide to do hunting, I don't know what you would do with the carcass or the trapping, but I don't think rabbit is kosher. Rabbit is not kosher. And, you wouldn't be able to use it for eating. Sorry.
They don't have
Yeah,
hooves
solves
either.
that problem.
There you
It
have.
certainly does. What'd you say, Jamie? They don't
I
have
said-
split hooves?
Yeah, they don't have split hooves either.
That's what he said. Yeah, they don't
Yeah.
have split hooves. Okay, good. We're getting a really good zoology lesson today. I love it. So let's see, 1 second. See, for our Ruth, I'm sorry, you just blinked out just as they were asking you. I don't know what it is. You have wonky Wi-Fi. Yeah, Jeff, what's your question?
What are your thoughts about glatt kosher food or meat?
So let's talk about what glatt kosher means. Okay, that's a good question. Because these are exactly the kind, I forgot to even put that in. These are the kinds of these are the kinds of things you'll meet in real life. So glatt, I don't know what the word actually means. It's in Yiddish. I'm not sure what the word means, but it's a slightly more stringent way of, I think it's that the animal has to be less blemished. Like there are certain blemishes that general kosher accepts. I think that's what it is. But glatt kosher has become a household word for more kosher or more stringent, to the extent that it's even used for dairy and it has nothing to do with dairy. But it's a way of, right, if it's talking about an animal being less blemished, dairy doesn't actually have an animal. So it's not even relevant. But because it's become a household word that follows a certain stringency that the general population the general Orthodox population does not follow. But I will say, as you go more to the right, everybody has to eat glatt, because if you don't eat that, then nobody will eat in your house, whether you follow that rule or not. So what are my personal thoughts about that? As long as I trust the person who gives the hechsher, which is another word for the kosher supervision, that's the word in Hebrew, hechsher, I don't care if it's glatt or not. As long as I know that that person is reliable, that organization, person, whatever it is. And in order to do that, did I put that in the file? I'm just trying to check what the kosher, we have links to certain sites that tell you what the kashrut is, which ones, we have a list that, did I send that to you? Let me just check. Give me a moment. Just looking at our source sheet. Okay. I should probably put glatt in here, shouldn't I? I'll put it in here. Just a moment. Glatt, where can we put that? All right, I'll add that in there. Okay. just looking to see if you have the, I don't know if I put in the link. I'm going to put that into your source sheet, what the link is to different places that we look to find whether something has good supervision. And that was one of the questions I wanted to talk about, is what is good supervision and what is not good supervision. So hold on one second. I'm just trying to think, is there anything else about kosher that we need to know? We spoke about fruits and vegetables. Oh, so, okay, meat, we spoke about. Any other questions about meat? Okay, so chicken and fowl, birds of different kind, we said that even though it's not biblically prohibited, it's not biblically considered meat, and you could have it with dairy, but it is rabbinically, because either at the time or rabbis thought that it would be confused. As we know, many people can, put into the meat category chicken and turkey and duck and things, because it kind of acts like meat, and you have to slaughter it and you have to kosher it. You do the same things with it that you do with meat. So that was all put in the same category. And now we get to dairy. So what do we need to know about dairy? Any thoughts? Now, Tifara, Ruth, you want to say like what makes dairy kosher or not?
What makes dairy kosher? This would probably be you know what, because I'm actually dairy free, so I never
Me
really
too.
pay attention to dairy. What would make dairy kosher? Let's
Or
just-
not kosher?
or not kosher. Well, I guess if it was derived from a non-kosher animal.
Excellent. If it's from a non-kosher animal, I don't know what that means, but camel milk, I guess,
I don't
would
know.
be not kosher. I guess people, yak milk. Oh, wait, did you say yaks are kosher? Oh, never mind. Yak milk is okay. And the other thing, what? Not kosher? Oh, tiger milk.
Tiger milk?
Tiger
Wow.
milk is not kosher. Does anybody drink tiger milk? I don't know. No. Okay. Jeff says no. I think I read somewhere like some story once about tiger milk, that it was used as a, to cure something. Who would want to get milk from a tiger? Not I. Okay. So it has to be from a kosher animal. And also in the process of it becoming cheese or butter or whatever that process is, I'm not so familiar either, especially since I also don't have dairy, but also just because I just look for supervision. There at least was, and there may still be, that it is often cured or processed with something not kosher, or with some, like the stomach of a cow or something like that. And then it's meat and dairy together. So even dairy needs to have supervision of some kind. And cheeses especially can have either in the processing or one of the ingredients could have something non-kosher. So we always look for kosher supervision. All right. Just want to make sure that's clear. Just see if there's something else. I think it's a good idea to go through the common practice of modern orthodoxy. Okay. Any other questions about what makes things inherently? Oh, we said wine. Remember we spoke about wine? Wine has its own special law because it was, I don't know if it still is used for libation for offering sacrifices for non-Jewish gods, not God, but for idols, I guess. So therefore it must be owned by a Jew and just taken care of by a Jew, the wine. So non-kosher wines are all over the place, but we only drink kosher wines. Okay. And there are derivatives that, like wine vinegar, which is why even in a dairy restaurant, you can't, vegan restaurants a little different, but in a dairy restaurant, it's, even though you could say, well, there's no meat, there's no chicken, but often there are ingredients that are just not kosher. And there's no way for you to know. So it's, I think I want to talk about eating out before we do other things. People familiar with some people who eat out differently? Are people familiar with that? Ever anybody heard of that? So what do you know about that, Jamie? Because I see you're nodding.
there are some things, Adam's parents are very, keep kosher. And when they go out, they will eat certain fish. But they always tell,
Okay.
yeah,
So they'll eat fish that is kosher, like salmon,
like salmon.
but how
yeah.
how do they know what? And then the question is, what would be okay, you tell me from this group, what could be the problem if they go to a non-kosher restaurant and they choose salmon, which is inherently kosher? And let's even assume it's cut with a clean knife. What could be the problem? This is not a judgment on Adam's parents. Everybody should do what works for them. I'm telling you,
yeah,
what could be the issue, Jamie?
cross-contamination, through like they're using similar pans, or they're using the knives, or any
So
of that.
right. So we said if it's a non-kosher restaurant, then that means that they also have non-kosher meat, I would assume, or kosher theoretically meat, but not slaughtered, not ritually koshered, so it's not kosher. And the same knives, the same utensils, the same heat, the same oven, the same pans, even if they're cleaned. Remember what we said, that it could absorb some of the taste of the non-kosher, and therefore through heat it can also exude it. So the taste of the non-kosher theoretically could become part of the salmon. So so that's why I was talking about the fact that the food is kosher, and then the processing is different. So that's the reason why I, for example, would not eat that food, even though it could be all the ingredients are kosher. That's the other problem. It could be that our ingredients they're putting on the salmon, they may say just season with salt and pepper, right? Or soy sauce, which also should be kosher. I don't know if there's non-kosher soy sauce. I'm not familiar, but theoretically they could put wine vinegar or something else that has a non-kosher ingredient. I don't even know. They could put clam juice on it. Like, they wouldn't know that's not kosher. So I don't know if people do that because I don't have that, but I have no clue if I said something that was ridiculous. Like nobody puts clam juice on salmon, but that's not the point. The point, right, maybe, but the point is that you don't know what's going into it. So there are many levels that it could be problematic, mostly because of the pan, the utensils, the heat, and you don't actually know. They might think, oh, well, so I put oil in, so what's the big deal? But maybe the oil was infused with a flavoring that's not kosher. But for the chef, he'd be like, well, I got to put something in to make it taste good.
Well, it's interesting because they always like say like they can't have anything that touch. They kind of give their list of things, whether or not it's always followed. I don't know. Right.
1 second. Yes, Martin.
Mention imitation crab,
What is there to mention about imitation crab?
that the natural flavor of sometimes imitation crab is crab juice.
Oh, I didn't know that. Martin said that the natural flavor of imitation crab might be crab juice. Okay, well, that wouldn't work for vegans or vegetarians. So they'd have to know that, right? So they'd have to know that. But see, here's the thing. That's correct, Jamie. And I would say they're hitting most of the checkpoints. What's left is probably, and I would assume that they use a clean knife for the salmon. So let's assume that. Hopefully a clean knife for the onion if they use onion. I don't know. What you're left with is, assuming they follow it, is that the pan itself would have absorbed non-kosher taste and might exude non-kosher taste. So I would say that they're probably, following almost everything.
Yeah. I mean,
Another way.
Yeah, they would never let anything come into the house that's not kosher.
Right.
and they're
Many people do that. Very careful in the house, which is terrific, because that
Mhm.
means anybody could really eat in their home. And it sounds like they're pretty careful going out, but there are certain things that they're not. And that's, I grew up in a very strictly Orthodox home, so we never differentiated between eating in the home and eating out. We also didn't eat out very much, if at all, actually, because we lived in Boston. There really weren't kosher places anyway. So it was never part of my personal family culture or friends culture to go out to eat. And even when I lived in Israel, it really wasn't part of it, more for money reasons than economic reasons, couldn't afford it. So I know that for many people, going out is a very big part of their culture. And so I guess that is why people kind of cut corners a little bit on kosher because of that. Because no matter how you look at it, it's got to cut at least one corner because you're not being careful about that. Now, one way to get around that, and again, you'd need to speak to them in the kitchen, have them follow it, what you could do, which by the way, I once went with my company in Israel. We went to Rhodes, the island of Rhodes, many years ago when I worked in high tech and before the high tech bust, when people had money. And I was kind of the mashgiach, which is one of your words, the one who was overseeing the kashrut because I knew it. And I really spent a lot of time on it. And at the time I even ate dairy, so that wasn't a problem. And every night they made us delicious fresh salmon. The only thing they could use was butter, which I had checked that butter was kosher. By the way, it was all written with Greek symbols like alpha, beta. Like, it was so funny that they actually used the word, the symbols that I use in mathematics, but they actually were using them. And I had I could only show them the picture that Chabad had given me, and we saw that it was kosher. So they used butter, salt, pepper, only clean. They were very careful. They double wrapped it all in tin foil. They put in fresh broccoli one night. One night they put in cauliflower. I don't remember what they put in anymore. I cannot even tell you how delicious it was, but they double wrapped it and put it in the oven. Now, if you double wrap something, or they put it on the frying pan double wrapped, either way, when something is double wrapped, remember I gave you the example on the airplane. How is it that you can heat up kosher food in an airplane right next to non-kosher food in the same oven? They don't have a separate oven for kosher meals. It's just double wrapped. So double wrap means taste cannot permeate. Why single wrap? Because single wrap could tear, but the chances of double wrapping tearing in the same place is unusual. Obviously, if it did, you couldn't use it. So they double wrapped it. I'm sorry, what?
Is that like, is it why at the grocery store a lot of kosher products have like the outside packaging, and then sometimes I find it's inside, or like kosher meat will have like multiple saran wrap layers?
I don't know if that's the reason, because when they're giving you a kosher product, it's not being cooked. So you're just having raw meat. So it's just, I think it's just wrapped doubly so it won't drip. I don't know, but maybe it's to differentiate. That's possible, because once it's wrapped a few times and has the kosher label, it's going to be harder to mix it up with it's a really good question. I don't know why, because when I said it has to be double, what I meant was if it's heated with non-kosher stuff, or in a non-kosher oven, or with other non-kosher food, or in a pan, that's when it has to be double wrapped. Taste cannot permeate by just sitting on a shelf. Even if it's sitting right next to non-kosher food, it can't actually waft in unless the non-kosher food is hot or your food is hot. That's the only way it would have to be the non-kosher food. So we try to take extra precautions, but it's an interesting question. But the reason it has to be double wrapped is when it's heated. So anyway, because I researched it and I spoke to them in the kitchen and they followed very specifically my instructions, I actually went into the kitchen and showed them, and you could see when you got it, it was double wrapped. It was amazing because we had this wonderful fresh. In fact, some people said that they tasted from it and our food was way better than theirs. But that just happened to be that time. I'm sure that the chef did his best, or her best, to make it delicious for everybody. Was that clear about the double wrapping? And okay. Now, in a vegan restaurant, you have another question? You have a much less of a chance for something to be non-kosher. Really, the only things that there's something called bishul akum. So there's a special law about non-Jewish people cooking your food or pressing the fire, like starting it, but it's only for food that is fit for a king, whatever that means, because almost all food that it used to be, I think, that food kind of fit for a king or for a very royal feast was only prepared for kings or for royal feasts. But today, I think we eat most foods, unless it's like really fancy food that you might not make at home. So it's a little complicated, bishul akum, but in general, in kosher restaurants, at least, even if you have non-Jewish people working in the kitchen, it's the Jew who starts the fire. And even in homes, it's a little complicated, but even in homes where you have an aide who's non-Jewish or somebody, so then you have to see what kind of food you're making. If it's very fancy food or certain foods, you might want to have a Jew start the fire. anyway, that could be a problem in a vegan restaurant that doesn't have supervision, that's not kosher. What else could be a problem in a vegan restaurant?
Grapeseed oil.
Right. So I don't know if it's grapeseed oil, it might be, or wine vinegar or something like that. But yes, anything having to do with grape products that's not kosher. And like mayonnaise isn't such a problem because they're not going to use regular mayonnaise because it has eggs in it and they don't use eggs. So I'm trying, and honey. So most of the things they have are just totally plant-based, or everything is actually. But the wine is an issue, and also bugs. There's a special, we didn't discuss that tonight, but there's a special thing with bugs that it's really a big no-no to have bugs, insects, creepy crawly things and the amount that you're allowed to, that slips through the FDA label as opposed to the kosher label is not the same, which is why, speaking of glatt kosher, somebody might write glatt kosher, I don't know, broccoli, which is meaningless. We lost somebody, Gavin, because there's no meat in broccoli, but what they mean is we're ultra orthodox about and caring about checking for insects. That's really what they mean. Because again, glatt kosher has become a label, and it means more than just this animal has fewer blemishes than other animals. So I would say it's much easier to be lenient about vegan restaurants if you're traveling far away. Not everybody. Some people would say, nope, even if you're traveling, that's your problem, take food with you. But I would be more comfortable, and people who I trust would be more comfortable. In fact, there are rabbis who I trust who say that pretty much any vegan restaurant, and they go through a whole long list of why, that the issues are actually resolved. And I haven't gone through them myself. But if you're traveling in a place like the Far East and they have, complete vegan restaurants that have only plant-based, and you really don't have an easier way to get the food, that would be the easiest to find workarounds or to allow for you to eat out or to buy from there. Now, something like sushi, could inherently really be kosher, because if it's only having, let's say if it has a rice cooker that's only used for rice and nothing else goes in it, but you'd have to check that. And if they don't use, again, clam seasoning or something like that, because you don't know, because if it's not kosher, they could use a whole bunch of stuff that just doesn't have kosher ingredients. But if it's, raw tuna or raw salmon and then vegetables or fruit in there, I mean, that's the kind of sushi that I eat. But it might have little crunchy things, and the crunchy things may not be kosher for whatever reason. It might have something in it that's not kosher. So even if you want, so that's why we don't just go and buy sushi from a non-kosher place, because you don't really know that pot that made the rice, is it only used for rice? If you knew that, that would be much easier. If you could go into their back room and you saw they have a rice cooker that's only used for rice, and the only thing that goes in there is rice and water, for example. And if you saw them, that they have salmon and tuna, and it's clean knives cut the cucumbers or whatever else that goes in it. But then basically what you're doing is being a mashgiach. You're the one who's doing the supervision, right? That's the whole point, is that somebody needs supervision. So not many people let you into their kitchens. Most restaurants don't let you sit and look over it unless they're paying an agency to give them the supervision label, which means that Jews who keep kosher will eat it. And by the way, non-Jews or even Jews who don't necessarily keep kosher know that things that have kosher supervision are pretty clean. They're well kept. There's a certain level of cleanliness and food purity that goes into that. So I know that there are people who eat that. However, we do know that meat or chicken that has this supervision, it's going to be more expensive, because you're paying for another level of somebody slaughtering it, of somebody koshering it, of somebody checking it, of somebody being on the premises. So that is at least a big part of the reason why kosher food is often more expensive. Because in addition to the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, you need more supervision. And that costs money to have people come in. They have to be paid for their time. And maybe they can't use all the stuff that comes in for whatever reason. So, okay, questions until questions. Trey, Parv, have we discussed Parv? Latoya, do you want to explain what pareve is? If you know. If you don't know, don't explain.
From what I remember, okay, so it's not meat, not dairy. That's all I remember.
No, that's great. That's
Okay.
exactly what it is. It would be kosher, but not meat and not dairy. So wait, don't go off mute. So give me examples of pareve food.
Pasta,
Not cooked with dairy, right?
right.
Just
Yeah.
the raw pasta generally is pareve, right? What else?
Potatoes.
All fruits and vegetables.
Okay, yes, you're right.
You could go through it, but it's all fruits and vegetables. They're not dairy. You could say potatoes, but you could also say potatoes and sweet potatoes and broccoli and lettuce and cucumber and tomato and apples and oranges. All fruits and vegetables are inherently pareve.
Perfect.
And oil is most often pareve. Most condiments most of them are pareve. They just don't have anything dairy or meat in them usually. What else is pareve? Crackers, cookies, unless they're dairy, they're generally not meat. Bread. There are some breads that are dairy. By the way, there's a thing about not making dairy bread.
No.
It's a thing. It used to be that people just never made kosher dairy bread, and they had to have a special shape because otherwise it's too easy to make a meat sandwich. You would know. And as a matter of fact, here's a little tip. When you go to Israel, and does everybody here know what burekas is? So burekas is this delicious flaky dough. It's a lot of calories with a lot of margarine in it, very flaky margarine. And it's filled with either potato, like mashed potatoes, or cheese, or spinach, or mushrooms, I think. I don't know what else. So it used to be traditionally there was only cheese or potato, and the potato was pareve, and the cheese one was dairy, or milchik, as Ashkenazic call it. Milchik from the word milk, which is like milk, dairy. And because from the outside, it's a big deal, right? Dairy or pareve. So always the potato burekas in Israel are always square or rectangular, and the cheese ones are triangular. It just is. And if somebody does it the other way, like you are not cool. Now, you could ask me, what about mushroom or what about spinach? So they just have to mark it. I don't know if they have the special shape, and then you could have spinach with cheese. That's probably very common because it's delicious together. So I don't know what those shapes are, but potato is always square or rectangular, and cheese is always triangular. Makes sense, right? Because from the outside, how would you know? Too easy to get confused. Okay, so good job on the pareve, Latoya. Good job. And remember, I said that I tend to have a lot of pareve because all side dishes by me pretty much are made pareve as a rule. And that way they could be used for meat or dairy. Anytime I make it in a side dish in meat or dairy, I'm almost always sorry I did that, but whatever. People who are vegan or vegetarian only need one set of dishes. I mean, you might have a nicer set for Shabbat. Now, any questions until here? Any questions on what we said? Yeah.
Do we have any rules around yeast?
What kind of rules?
Well, because I know like I'll bake with yeast and that kind of thing.
But
But,
yeast is pareve.
Okay, okay, great.
Right. It's not dairy. It's not inherent unless you use dairy liquid for it. Yeah. Great. The only thing you do have around yeast is if you make challah or bread from a certain amount of flour, there's a very special blessing and mitzvah. It's called taking challah. And guess what, Gabby Taylor? You get to research that for next time. Look it up.
Okay.
Taking challah. It's called taking challah. It's a big deal. It's very traditional for women to do it, although men could do it as well. Men make delicious challah as well. And research it. But often you'll find that women especially will get together and say 40 women, we're making challah and we're praying for the captives, or, we're praying for people to find a match, or, that's a big thing. Not for everybody, but some people do that, just so you know. But why don't you look up what taking challah, do some research, and you'll tell us about it next time. How's that?
Okay.
Okay.
Because usually I'll make like oat challah for my partner because he has no idea how to bake. Am I supposed to be saying a prayer when I do it?
So look it up, and we'll talk about it next time. You look up what you can look up, and then I'll add it to the source sheet. But taking challah is from a certain amount of flour. There's a minimum that you take challah without a blessing. I mean, you don't have to say a blessing yet because you're not Jewish yet, but it's a good thing to practice. And from a certain amount, you take it with a blessing, with a bracha. And it's just nice to have an opportunity to do a mitzvah. But it's based on a time when it used to be tithed and given to the priests. But today we don't have the temple and we don't do that. So we actually burn the piece we take off. But why don't you look it up and see what you learn about it and see if you can, okay? You know about taking challah, Tifara Ruth?
Yes.
Ruth. Yeah, you know about it. So great. So when Gabby talks about it, you'll be able to say what you know of it. I don't do that. I don't bake as a rule, especially since I'm gluten-free. So I don't generally bake. But oat challah I could eat.
Yes,
Because
I have.
but oat
quite a
usually
few.
has other flour in it. So you have to make sure it's not gluten-free flour. It doesn't have gluten. Yeah. Then it has things like rice flour or other flours so that people who are gluten-free can still eat it. It has to have 51% oat though. That's when we get to blessings. We're not up to that yet. Yes, Jeff.
I've seen markings on boxes of crackers saying challah was taken.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Is that going too far, or does that make sense?
Crackers?
Crackers. I guess
I
it
can't
started
answer that
out.
question. I didn't think so. I thought you only had to take challah from bread. There you go. Gabby, you're going to check that out.
Thanks, Gabby.
I'll add it to the list.
Add it to the list. Yes. I don't know all the little details. I really thought it was only from things that you make the blessing for bread. There's a different blessing for bread, hamotzi. I thought it was only for that. I could be wrong, but that's what I thought it was. But thank you, Jeff. Good question. So let's revisit that next week. It's a good idea. Like cake, you don't take challah from, so I don't understand that. If it acts like bread, I don't know. Not familiar with that. So yes, it does feel that it's overkill, so to speak, but we're going to look it up. Yes, Martin. Can you make kiddush on bread? No, but we're not up to kiddush.
He's
We're not up
advanced.
to that. Yeah, he's on the couch listening, half listening. He can only hear my side. He doesn't hear your side.
He's advanced.
He's advanced. Yeah,
Missing the good half.
Yeah, so he's missing the good half, right? So yeah, well, we'll have another unit on Shabbat. We'll have another unit on blessings, but I want to make sure to go over what we didn't do last year first. So I'm trying to touch all of those. And we did not do kashrut in detail. Now, what we haven't spoken about is what happens when you're traveling. What do you do? How do you manage when you go visit somebody in a non-kosher home? I think we're going to save that for next time when we'll wrap up kashrut. Next time, I think we'll wrap it up. I'll try to see if maybe I'll branch out to a few other little things that have to do with it. But so we'll talk about challah. I really want you to come with questions. I think that's important to come with questions. Why doesn't it say that it's recording? Oh, no, it is recording. Okay, that's good. Any questions about kashrut? This is really, there's more. I'm going to think about more things to bring in. We're going to go through real life scenarios. When do you have to ask questions? What kind of issues could come up? All right. And any thoughts you might have. We haven't spoken, I won't make the food non-kosher, but if you tovel the dishes, if you have to immerse the dishes, it's not exactly part of kosher food, but it's part of the dishes. So we'll just touch on all the last things, try to do, and then please come with any questions you might think of. That would be really helpful. Real life scenarios, all right? Tipara Ruth, I know that at some point we spoke about meeting. Did you say we have a time set up? I know we had to postpone it. Oh, is it every time I ask that question you freeze? I have like magic touch. Yeah.
Have one set for tomorrow. I'll double check.
I don't have it set for tomorrow, so that's not good if you think I do and I didn't think I did have one. When was it set for tomorrow? Wait, we can unstop the recording.
Okay. I'm